Hello, my friends. It's Pete, and 'tis the season of giving. This has been the worst year ever, but you've got this week and next week to make it better. This is the time to make your charitable donations. If you haven't already, before we close the books on this nightmare year of 2020, you can make it that much better and save lives. That's why I've been talking to you about GiveWell.org this month. For over 10 years, GiveWell.org has helped donors find the charities and projects that save and improve lives the most per dollar. I've always cared about data, research, and journalism, and GiveWell dedicates over 20,000 hours and years. Oh my God, imagine if they spent 20,000 hours a year researching charitable organizations. Then they handpick a few of the highest impact evidence-backed charities. I've been talking about it for years now. It's all based on effective altruism, a very important moral philosophy that I certainly subscribe to. And all that research, by the way, is publicly available. You can see it. It's transparent. It's on their website. And more importantly, GiveWell never takes any fees. So all of your tax-deductible donations are given to the charity that you choose. And since 2010, GiveWell has helped over 50,000 donors direct over $500 million to the most effective charities. Most importantly, these donations will save over 75,000 lives and improve the lives of millions more. This year, support the charities that save and improve lives the most with GiveWell. And if you want your donation to have more impact, act right now. Any of my listeners who become new GiveWell donors will have the first donation matched up to $250. So go to GiveWell.org/stand-up and select podcast and Stand Up Pete Dominic at the checkout. This matching offer good for only as long as funds last. I couldn't be prouder than to partner with this amazing organization for my first sponsorship deal. And you don't have to be a hero to save a life. You can save and improve lives by giving to the right charities. This holiday season, give where your donation will help most people at GiveWell.org/stand-up right now. And welcome to episode 254 of Stand Up. Joining me today, author and Professor Jared Yates Sexton. I'm Pete Dominic. Time to stand up with me right now. Hello, my friends, and welcome to Stand Up. I'm here every single day of the week talking to the most brilliant folks I can find, usually two, sometimes one. It's been a little bit lighter lately just because I've been doing so many things, but I very much appreciate you tuning in and supporting me and the show, learning and living and laughing along with me every day. I am excited to welcome my parents onto the show later on. They join me for the news dump, but in this first segment of each and every day, I go through some of yesterday's news and play some of the relevant audio for you. Lots of folks really liking this first part of the show. Really nice email from Andrew Miller, who said that, "You're right, Pete, your daily dose of news and commentary is really filling a void. Not to give you a bigger head, but I'm starting to equate your show with Jon Stewart's Daily Show and the Colbert Report. Great news, okay comedy, and great interviews. Those guests challenge me to read and learn more, and the same goes for you and your guests. Congrats on your newfound platform for success, and keep fighting the good fight." Andrew Miller, thank you very much for that email. That was really nice. I appreciate it. A lot of nice emails from folks, and a lot of folks sending me their nature pictures. Every day, I send out an email, and if you're a subscriber to the Stand Up with Pete Dominic community, then you get that email every morning. It tells you who's on the show, and I'm trying to add to it as much as I can. And one thing that I'm doing is it opens with a nature picture sent to me by a listener of this show. And that does two things. It gets you outside, motivates you to get outside and get exercise, including in the dead of winter. And it also is a great way for me to open that email. And I just love getting your pictures, whether or not I post them in that email or not. So send me what I call vitamin N, well, what my friend writer Rich Louv calls vitamin N. Hashtag vitamin N. Send those nature photos to standupwithpete@gmail.com. A really nice one from Brian Hoyt, who is up in Edmonton, Alberta, for today's episode. And sign up now to be a paid subscriber to the stand-up community and join us on Wednesday night. This Wednesday, usually Thursdays at 8, but this Wednesday at 8, because Thursday is Christmas Eve, we'll be hanging out. Who is going to join us? What special guest will it be? I haven't yet heard back from Laura Coates, who I reached out to first, but I'm trying to get somebody to join us. But if not, it'll just be us. We'll always have a great time with the stand-up hangouts on Zoom, so hopefully you'll be a part of that. Sign up and be a subscriber now. Lots of new folks in the last few days, and I'm so excited to have all of you and your support. All right, let's get to that audio and news I always love to share with you at the top here. And let's start in hell, which froze over when even Pat Robertson thinks it's time for Trump, who he calls erratic, to move on from the election. Now, this is the same Pat Robertson, of course, who back in October said that he'd talked to God. I guess he DM'd him or something, and God told him that Trump would win. Here is that clip from Pat Robertson's dumb show, the Crypt Keeper Club or something. I forget what it's called.
And the next thing is the election that's coming up in just a few weeks, at which time, according to what I believe the Lord told me, the president is going to be reelected. I'm saying by all means, get out and vote for whoever you want to vote for, but by all means, let your voice be heard. But it's going to lead to civil unrest of a great proportion, then a war against Israel and so forth and so on.
Whoa, wait, there's a lot of predictions there at the end. First, the Lord told him that Trump's going to win, then there's going to be a war against Israel. Slow down there, Pat. Well, anyway, Pat Robertson was back at it on Monday, and he said that Trump is got to go and that he's dishonest and lives in an alternative reality. Yeah, Pat Robertson.
I think it's all over. I think the Electoral College has spoken. I think the Biden corruption has not totally been brought to...
What are you talking about?
Fruition, but it doesn't seem to be affecting the Electoral College.
Give this guy a script.
And I don't think the Supreme Court is going to move in to do anything. And I think we're going to see a President Biden, and I also think we'll be seeing a President Kamala Harris not too long after the inauguration of President Biden. With all his talent and the ability to raise money and draw large crowds, the president still lives in an alternate reality. He really does. People say, well, he lies about this, that, and the other. But no, he isn't lying. To him, that's the truth. He had the biggest crowd on Inauguration Day. He had more people than ever. He was the most popular people. He saved NBC. But with The Apprentice, you go down the line of things that really aren't true. And, people kept pointing to them. But because they loved him so much and he was so strong for the evangelicals were with him all the way. But there was something about him that was good, that God placed him in that office for the time. He's done a marvelous job for the economy. But at the same time, he is very erratic, and he's fired people, and he's fought people, and he's insulted people, and it keeps going down the line. So it's a mixed bag. And I think it would be well to say, you've had your day, and it's time to move on.
Wow, Pat Robertson with a lot of criticism for Donald Trump, saying it's time to move on. I think that's pretty significant. Is that significant? Does that guy hold any weight in the evangelical community? Anybody know? Is anybody here in the shed that can answer that question for me? Why am I asking these questions right now? Okay, so also wanted to play for you the Attorney General Bill Barr, former ally of the president, but of course, President Trump just fired him, or he resigned. He fired him. Maybe he wanted to get out before he fired him. Who knows? Who cares? Bill Barr's a POS, and he sounds in this clip, by the way. Listen to Bill Barr. He has the lowest energy and sounds like the saddest man alive. And you just have to hear this 2 minutes or so of his back and forth with reporters on Monday.
Does the president have the legal authority to order the seizure of voting machines around the country? And you've talked about in your past the broad views that you have of presidential power. Does the president, any president, have the authority to pardon themselves?
I see no basis now for seizing machines by the federal government. A wholesale seizure of machines by the federal government. And off the top of my head, I'm not going to opine on a constitutional issue as far as the pardon power goes. Yes.
The president has continued to make the case that there was fraud in the election. You've already made your statement on that in an interview. Do you believe there's enough evidence to warrant appointing a special counsel to look into it, which is something that he appears to be thinking about, perhaps Sidney Powell? Do you believe that there is any reason to do that? Have you already given your opinion on this to the president and the White House?
As you said, I've already commented on fraud. Let me just say that, there are fraud unfortunately, in most elections. I think we're too tolerant of it, and I'm sure there was fraud in this election. But I was commenting on the extent to which we had looked at suggestions or allegations of systemic or broad-based fraud that would affect the outcome of the election, and I already spoke to that, and I stand by that statement.
But about the idea of appointing a special counsel, would you answer a question about whether you believe there's enough there, even with what you've already said? Do you believe there's enough evidence to warrant a special counsel to investigate that, perhaps Sidney Powell or someone else?
Well, if I thought a special counsel at this stage was the right tool and was appropriate, I would name one, but I haven't, and I'm not going to. Yes, Sadie.
Yes, Sadie. Yeah. Yes, Sadie. Sounds like Rain Man. Okay, so that is the outgoing Attorney General, Bill Barr, taking questions, saying he is not going to do what Trump wants him to do. It sounds like nobody is going to do what Trump wants them to do. He is more murmurs and rumors that he is trying to declare some kind of martial law. Not going to happen, folks. Let's listen to the great retired United States Army Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, Vietnam veteran, helicopter pilot, hero, as a matter of fact, former Chief of Staff to Secretary of State Colin Powell. Now he's a professor. And Lawrence Wilkerson was on MSNBC with Chris Hayes last night, who asked him if he thought or was concerned at all about President Trump ordering the military to do something nuts, something crazy. And here is Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson.
There'll be nothing with the military. In my very strong view, the military will not do anything untoward, no matter what orders come from him. And indeed, if the orders were truly untoward, the 25th Amendment might be implemented. I don't see how people could stop from doing that. What worries me, Chris, right now is the opportunistic advantage that's out there right now for a very hard pressed by COVID-19, North Korea, for example, Kim Jong-un, for a very pressured China with regard to what Taipei is doing and Taiwan in general, and in the situation with Iran where we have them just waiting. These are the kinds of things that Trump could leave as a blow to the country, and it would wind up being a significant blow to the country and to the new administration.
All right, retired Army Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson on MSNBC. Let's head over to listen to some conservative media over on, it's called Newsmax. It's Trump's new favorite network because Fox News is not conspiracy enough for him. And former White House advisor and pro-Trump radio host Seb Gorka was the host of this show, and he had to cut off the MyPillow asshole, Mike Lindell, when MyPillow fuckface began to talk about his stupid conspiracy theories. And you may or may not have heard, but these companies that are being defamed by people like MyPillow guy are now suing these networks. And so Seb Gorka has to cut him off when he starts talking about the voting machine companies.
And I'll tell you what, nobody realizes, I mean, what a miracle we had on election night at 11:15. You know, you talked about all this fraud, Doctor. The biggest fraud is the Dominion machines. And at 11:15 on election night, our great president, because of everything
Mike, I don't want to discuss, Mike, we're not going to get into the minutiae of the details. Oh. I want to ask you, because this show is about courage. It's hosted by a guy who's a former Marine. I want to know why you, Mike Lindell, are supporting the president in these legal cases.
Well, because everything's on the line here. Everything's on the line. Our freedom's my American dream that I've lived. Everybody's American dream. This is it. If you let them steal this, which I 100% know that's what they went on, this is over 6 million votes that got flipped. Over 6 million. He won all the states that we're talking about, the 7 states, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Nevada, and Arizona. They're all getting stole.
You know what else is getting? My pillows are like sleeping on a bag of rocks. If you were being honest, if the guy was ever honest, that's what he'd say, because his pillows suck and he sucks. That's Mike Lindell, the My Pillow guy. Speaking of conservative media, apparently Sean Spicer, the president's first spokesman, Sean Spicer, he apparently has a show also on Netflix, and he had crazy Rudy Giuliani on. It was hilarious because Rudy was saying nobody will have him on anymore, not even Fox. Listen to dumb Rudy.
I can't get on ABC, NBC, CBS. Can't even get on Fox anymore. If I say the word fraud, I'm thrown off the network. I'm sorry. There was fraud. I'm telling the truth, and they're lying.
I mean, where is he? At a children's daycare? What the hell is Rudy broadcasting from? But here is more from America's mayor, COVID survivor, and vampire bat, Rudy Giuliani. Disavowing the only person crazier than him, apparently, lawyer Sidney Powell.
But I want to bring you back to these reports that in the Oval Office, Sidney Powell, who had been part of your legal team until she was dismissed, has been there at least 3, potentially 4 times. So there's a rumor that she is trying to become, or people are advocating that she be appointed special counsel and that their voting machines be seen. Can you tell us what's happening in the Oval Office and what her role will be?
Let me say definitively, Sidney Powell is not part of our legal team. She hasn't been for 5 weeks. She is not a special counsel for the president. She does not speak for the president, nor does she speak for the administration. She speaks for herself. And she's a fine woman, a fine lawyer, but whatever she is talking about, it's her own opinions. I'm not responsible for them. The president isn't, nor is anybody else on our legal team.
All right, here is my friend Dr. Jason Johnson, who is also an MSNBC contributor, a political scientist. He was on The Last Word on MSNBC with another good friend of mine, Ali Velshi, and I don't need to really set this clip up more than just say, here's Jason Johnson doing what he does. Johnsoning. What?
Here's the thing, and this is very important for people to understand. It's not just that we are in a coup, but we are at the beginning of a coup that will only get more violent. Coups don't have to be successful, right? It's like attempted murder. Attempted murder is still a crime, even if you're not successful. You have people storming state capitals. We had people trying to kidnap the governor of Michigan. Today in Oregon, you had people breaking into the state capitol and shooting chemical agents at local police officers and journalists. They're all acting at the behest of Donald Trump. Unless anybody thinks that it's like, well, they're not directly. Remember, this is the guy who, during a presidential debate, told the Proud Boys, who are a terrorist organization or a terrorist sympathizing organization, to stand by and, stand up and stand by. So this is what the president is calling for. The meetings are going to be less problematic than the number of men and women that you have on the ground who are willing to engage in violence. So that is the danger here. It has to be seen as a danger. And the men and women who are placating the president on this, the men and women in Congress who are pretending that this isn't really an issue, they are now terrorist sympathizers. Because if you can't stand up and see actual acts of violence that are happening in our states about this election, then you're sympathizing with terrorists.
Whew, what do you think of that? Too hyperbolic? I don't think so. I honestly don't think so. Did you hear about that former police captain, Mark Aguirre, who pulled over an air conditioning repairman, saying that he had hundreds of thousands of ballots in his truck and found nothing, but held the guy at gunpoint until he himself was arrested? Yeah, you probably haven't heard about that. Or if you have heard about that, everybody should hear about that, hear more about that Pizzagate guy than a guy who actually held another human being at gunpoint because he believed the president of the United States and others who are supporting his insane, dangerous conspiracy theories. All right, and that is yesterday's news. Send your stories to standupwithpete@gmail.com. Any audio you're seeing that you want me to share from yesterday or anytime, an old quote, a passage, whatever you want, send it my way. Always happy to take a look and potentially share it on the show. And now it's time for the news dump. And joining me for tonight's news dump, it is my mom and dad, Chuck and Mary.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you for joining me, Mom. Thank you for joining me, Dad. Are you ready for the news?
Yep, ready.
Ready, Dad?
Yep, I'm ready. They call them dumps, big, massive dumps.
Here we go, everybody. Time for the News Dump Special Edition with my parents. Let us start in Colorado, Dad, where you've taken us skiing many times, and sadly, 3 people died backcountry skiing in avalanches. Experts warned those headed to the backcountry should be careful and pay attention to forecasts. Did you ever do backcountry skiing in the Rockies and worry about an avalanche, Pop?
I did it once, and and everybody says, be careful and don't ski in the line behind you. And, the guy ahead of you. And I said, what's the problem? And they said, did you notice that all the way over here there were no trees? And I go, what about it? And they said, they've all been taken out in avalanches. We're in heavy avalanche country.
Oh, dear.
That was in Wyoming. Yeah. Oh. I got very nervous after that. I didn't go back to that place.
Fair enough. Mom, have you ever been in an avalanche?
No, I never intend to.
Mom, can you think of a worse way of dying? Okay, moving on. Let's go to something else. Millions are flying in this country, in the United States of America, despite COVID warnings. 3.2 million people have already passed through TSA checkpoints over the weekend. I guess we didn't learn anything on Thanksgiving, Mom.
That really upsets me. People just absolutely refuse to follow procedures that are suggested to prevent COVID, the spread of COVID.
Dad, what do you have to say to people who are traveling to be with their families? I mean, you want to be with your family?
Yeah, I'd like to be, but I just would soon be staying alive so I can see them more often later.
Right, yeah, I think it's a longer game.
Not a good idea to die, and then, it just doesn't make any sense to me.
It's what you're saying is it's harder to see the people you love dead? That's what I'm hearing.
I think it is. I believe it would be, yeah.
No expert.
But I'm thinking it is, yeah.
How about
I see all these football players, they point their finger up to the sky, and the baseball players, they point up to the sky, so maybe they know something. I don't know.
That's a good point. You bring up a good point. Yeah, maybe they should risk seeing each other for Christmas because you could always see them in the sky later.
Think about all those people that point their fingers up to their uncle or whoever they're praising, they look up, I got a touchdown. They look up at their uncle. Does that mean he can see them all the time?
It's a good question.
It's a good question. Be embarrassing, you know?
No doubt about it. There's certain things
doing something you don't want your uncle to know about. Yeah. He's looking at you, so.
Yeah, all good points, Pop. Okay, in the state of Virginia, the General Lee, Robert E. Lee, of course, the leader of the Confederate military, represented Virginia in U.S. Capitol for 111 years, has now been removed. Where are you guys on removing Confederate statues, Mom?
Doesn't bother me. I think it's a good idea.
Dad?
When you really break it down, if you are the leader of an army that's trying to overthrow the United States government, that makes you a traitor.
It does, yeah.
So, probably not a good idea to have a statue to him.
How do you explain the Robert E. Lee statue we had in our lawn growing up?
That's different.
Moving on to...
That used to be blackface. We changed it.
Oh, it was? Oh, because it was blackface and then we changed it. That's right. You just made it even more offensive, a blackface Confederate. Yeah, that was bad when we did that. But
yeah, well, what are you going to do,
volcano is erupted on Hawaii's Big Island, drawing a lot of crowds there. And when I read that, I was like, well, that's got to be scary. You live on an island and it's a volcano and it's erupting, but apparently it's not that big of a deal. What do you think? You guys been to Hawaii?
That happens all the time in Hawaii, doesn't it?
I think Hawaii is one big volcano, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a volcano. Yeah, you go every place there's rocks. If the golf courses are all dirt that was brought in by boats, by ships.
Yeah. Did you do a lot of golfing on your Hawaii trip?
Oh yeah, you kidding me? I got about 100 holes in. Yeah,
I don't think that's what. I'm not sure that's what they say. How about this one, Dad? You're a big car guy, of course. You have several cars. What do you think of Apple? Apple Computers Incorporated. You're also an Apple product guy. You love going to the Apple store and shooting the shit. They're moving forward with their self-driving car technology, and they're gonna have cars by 2024. What do you think of that?
I don't think I want to say. What do you drive? I'm driving around in my Apple. That just doesn't sound cool.
You don't like that?
No, it's just not cool. I'm driving around in my Apple. Oh, really? Okay. Is that the orange one? No, it's an Apple.
An Apple car. It's going to be a great car, just like all the rest of their products, don't you think?
It's going to be, I don't know. They're just taking it. They're taking the Apple too far.
Apple car.
Yeah.
All right. Mom, do you want an Apple car?
No, it doesn't sound too cool. Maybe a Jaguar, Corvette or something, but not an Apple.
We'll see about that in 2024 when you're both driving Apple cars. All right. West Point has accused more than 70 cadets of cheating in the worst academic scandal in nearly 45 years. More than 70 cadets at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point accused of cheating on a math exam. I thought that you're supposed to be the height of honor at West Point Military Academy. You can't be cheating where the honor system is so integral in the academy. What do you think of that?
Are they remote learning?
I don't know. It's a good question. But if they are and they're not cheating, they're doing something wrong because, your granddaughters cheat all goddamn day.
That's good.
I told them they shouldn't.
Everybody does. There's not a kid in there that's not cheating. There's not a teacher in America that doesn't think they're looking at, 15 other screens while they're taking a test.
So then that's why West Point is doing it. They have a president that cheats all the time. Why not?
Oh, it's not supposed to be political, this segment.
Example. That's okay.
Finally, this story out of Rio Linda, California. A man dressed up as Santa found himself a little more tied up than usual, according to ABC News. A Northern California man impersonating Santa Claus and flying on a powered parachute. You know those are? The fan behind it?
Yeah.
He became entangled in power lines, and apparently he was going to deliver candy canes to children in his community, but then he flew through a maze of power lines and ended up getting suspended in them. The man, who's not identified, was not injured. What do you think of that method of delivering holiday cheer?
How come they don't know who he is?
That's a good question. I guess the journalism is just not...
It's pretty weak.
Yeah.
I don't think there's too much holiday cheer when the kids don't get the candy canes. And why couldn't he just walk in or drive in, whatever? Why does he have to come in a parachute like that?
Because he didn't want to be identified.
Well, could be. And finally, Dad, I know you've got a story of your own.
We found some big holes underneath our deck. We don't know what kind of animals.
Oh, yeah, that's a very local story at your house, yeah.
Very local, I would call it. Very
you
local.
Found holes under your deck.
Yeah, not unlike the coyotes from a couple of weeks ago. Maybe it's them. They moved in.
All right.
So the only story that I find interesting is that Mars and Jupiter, I think it's Mars and Jupiter, lined up at night, and they were in the southwest sky, which, of course, we live in Syracuse, so you can't see them because all we have is clouds.
Jupiter and Saturn.
Yeah.
Whatever. It doesn't matter.
It does. It actually matters. It's the entire crux of the story.
Who could it possibly matter to? Jupiter, Saturn, Mars. What's the difference?
The people of the planet who you disregarded probably care a bit. Jupiterians, I think.
Yeah, Jupiter. I didn't mean
very offended.
You got me on that one.
Yeah.
So the whole point is we didn't get to see it.
You're a Saturnist.
We have
hates people from Saturn.
We don't deserve to see it. So it's brighter than. In the article that I wrote said it's brighter than any star. And this was written when I read it. It was written up as a once in a lifetime event.
Well,
the last time this happened was 340 years ago.
Yeah.
Once in a lifetime. That's a long life.
You guys didn't even bother to go outside, did you?
Yes, we did. I went outside.
Well, we looked out the window. Yeah.
No, I went out on the deck.
Mom, final news story from you. What do you got?
Well, I only had the man who threw a tantrum in Costco because they told him he had to wear a mask.
Oh.
It was in Florida. And he was lying on the floor, wouldn't move. And I didn't have time for anything else because I've been baking cookies all day.
All right. Well, that is a robust news dump. Thanks, folks.
Good night, Pete.
All right. Good night.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, that was fun. Always fun. And now let's get to my guest for today's show. Ladies and gentlemen, he has quickly become one of your favorites here on the podcast. He is an author and a creative writing professor, political commentator, and podcaster. You can listen to his podcast. It's called the Muckrake Podcast. Wherever you get your podcast, you can also support him on Patreon and follow him on Twitter at JY Sexton, where he is prolific. His most recent book, which is simply amazing, rave reviews by all kinds of brilliant folks, many of which joined me on the show, is called American Rule, How a Nation Conquered the World but Failed Its People. We had an awesome conversation last night, and I'm always happy when he joins me. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Jared Yates Sexton. And our conversation begins talking about social media, in particular Twitter, where he's great.
I've had to come to terms with what Twitter actually is, which is just like a paper bag that we yell into, and it commodifies our yelling. I mean, it really is. It's like, it's this really insidious project, really. Like, it has this idea that you're like communicating with other people, you're building connections and communication. And meanwhile, all it does is it takes the outrage at inequality and mistreatment and cultural cruelty, and it commodifies it. There is I think about this all the time. It's like, if you just get enough retweets, Pete, if you just get enough likes, enough impressions, you're going to bring it all down. You know what I mean? Like,
no, I don't think of it that way. I think if I get enough retweets and likes, my day will be better and I'll feel better about myself. I'm not that ambitious.
Well, my parents will love me more than they already do. It is one of those things, though, where I kind of had to have a moment of reckoning with it. And I was talking about this before we started recording. Like, that's where I first gained a sort of a foothold or a soapbox or whatever you want to say.
That's where I found you.
And I had to come to terms with the fact that this is a machine that basically turns us all into individual corporations that release PR, public relations statements on a moment, the same way that Taco Bell is like, Taco Bell, Liv Moss does not believe in police brutality. And you're like, all right, thank you, Taco Bell. And so we send all those things out. But what I've done for the past, probably the last 2 years is I've tried to short circuit what it actually is. I've tried to use it as like a means of actual communication and solidarity building and education. So I've been trying to sort of use it to germinate seeds of dissent, but it's a really hard little world to do that in.
Well, I don't know if this is what you mean by it, but I was going to say the way that you use Twitter is interesting, and most people don't do this, but you don't write, you don't always write just whatever, how many characters is it? 240?
280.
You write a lot of threads that are almost like columns or essays. And that is, in a way, hacking Twitter because it's nuanced. And what I try to do is, because I'm not a great writer, and I've been doing this with a lot of people, and as I was telling you about this stupid Twitter argument I was having earlier, I actually invite people to call me. I give them my number. And I'm like, let's have you're saying something. I think we're talking past each other. We're both being dicks, which I'm really good at. So let's call each other and treat each other with respect and listen to each other on the phone. And I did it tonight with some guy. I had no idea who he's in Twitter, but he's like an orchestra leader in Oregon. We were arguing on Twitter. We had a fantastic conversation on the phone.
Oh, a real symphony of minds. I like that. So I have to say, I'm not giving out my phone number on Twitter, but back in the day,
did, though.
So when I
just gave your number. Sorry.
When I was when I was like going to Trump rallies and reporting on that, I was getting like tons of like alt-right, neo-Nazi, like people coming after me. And I could initially tell who were the white supremacists and the white terrorists. And then the people in between who were like, you're lying. I'd be like, hey, let's have a conversation, you and me. Here's who I am. Here's what I do. What are you into? And they would tell me, and I would be like, that's great. Yep. I love Ghostbusters too. Yep. Let's talk about that as well. And so when you actually talk to people, you start to actually short circuit the trench warfare mentality of social media. And all of a sudden you're not a deep state operative. All of a sudden you're a dude who lives in rural Georgia who watches movies.
Yeah. The things that were said about me in this all day Twitter fight are hilarious because it's like, you could look me up. It's not true what you said. Like, I'm not that person. I didn't do that thing. I don't have that job. I don't know what you're talking about. Somebody accused me of living in Martha's Vineyard. Like, you're an elitist who lives in Martha's Vineyard. I'm like, I wish that were true. I don't. I live in a raised ranch. I broadcast from a shed.
I do have to say, Pete, I have been called a coastal elite.
Really?
Which technically I do live near the coast in Georgia in a small rural college town. And I am a liberal arts professor, which means I get paid the medium bucks.
I don't think anybody saying coastal elite is ever referencing the Georgia coast, but what do I know? I don't know. Maybe.
Good luck to everybody. I love, by the way, that this conversation is spurred on the fact that you spend all day just arguing with people on Twitter. That's the best part about it all.
I enjoyed it. I just want to be clear. I loved it. Loved it. I got so mad when my phone went dead while I was out. Because I would go at every stoplight, I would argue more. And then I didn't, and my phone died, and I was helpless. And I looked over at someone at the stoplight, and I wanted to argue with him.
You're just like, quote tweet, you're wrong.
Yeah. All right, so here it is. Here's what started it all, and I want to get your take on it, this Twitter argument. This morning I wrote, if you're upset with Democrats, Pelosi, Schumer, et cetera, on the COVID relief bill, what would you have had them do? The outraged left is becoming the outraged right, by screaming and demanding that Democrats in Congress do something that they can't. And then I wrote this, to be clear, perhaps I'm missing something. And I meant that in good faith. Like, I'm sure there are some really smart left-wing folks who are writing about how the negotiations could have been done differently. But what I think is, and the only other thing that I would add to that is that, where's this other tweet adding to it? Oh, David Roberts, who I love, who is now doing his own newsletter, formerly of Vox, writes, nothing is more fundamental to the worldview of the very online, overeducated, hyperverbal, A-student left than the notion that words and messaging are the skeleton key to politics, the answer to every political challenge. Nothing can dissuade them from this belief. The point is that what he's saying way more articulately than I am, it doesn't matter what your messaging is sometimes. Sometimes you have to have leverage. And my final point, Jared, and I'll shut up for the rest of the conversation, is Mitch McConnell couldn't be forced into doing anything because he doesn't care about anybody, meaning millions of Americans are dying. White, black, rich, and young. He does not care. The only thing that made him move on negotiations was the Georgia runoff election. It's the only leverage that Democrats had. They were getting pounded. He conceded the $600, which is the headline. People don't realize all the rest of the things in the bill. So he made the deal. That's it. Otherwise, Democrats in the House couldn't do anything about Mitch McConnell in the Senate. I'm out.
Okay, so to start off, the $600 is an embarrassment. I mean, I just want to state that. Like, it's an absolute absurdity that the United States of America will not take care of its own people. This is a government that is more or less bought and sold by the wealthy and powerful, and it is not a force for good or public good. I got to say that. The second part is, I love that phrasing of what you just read. It's actually, to me, it's very much like the West Wingification of America. Ooh. Which, by the way, do not get me wrong. I love a good episode of The West Wing. Sure. Like, I'll put it on. I love it. I love watching Lyman and them walk through the hallways and talk. And, I love watching Bartlett talk about liberal ideas in like a beautiful, sweeping, patriotic way. It's wonderful. But that's not how actual politics works. Like, actually, the left wants to be on the right side of history and for that to win out, right? They want Mitch McConnell for his Grinch heart to grow 2 sizes larger because he hears the right collection of words and rhetorical tricks. The problem is that we should expect more, but we can't expect more. That's the whole point, is we actually have a situation now to expect the Democratic Party, particularly as it is currently constructed, to play some other hand. That's not going to happen. That's just not going to happen. That's not who the Democrats are. That's not what the Democratic leadership is. You can make the argument that the Democratic Party could use the bully pulpit and that they could come out and actually talk about politics as it is, but they don't do that. That's within this entire situation. They use the vulnerability of the Georgia special election to get a little bit of money for the American people and a more amount of money for businesses. But no, there was nothing else really to be done in this situation.
Well, I don't know how they could have used the bully pulpit differently, and I think what you're also saying is the majority of Democrats in the House aren't nearly as progressive as the far left of their flank, but many are. And here's the thing that I see. The same thing that's happening on the left is happening on the right. On the right, the vast majority of Democrats, or rather Republicans, are extremists and conspiracy theorists. And by the way, that's long before Trump. Ron Johnson was on Mark Levin's show. Mark Levin, one of the most popular right-wing people in radio. And Mark Levin was demanding that Ron Johnson do something. And Ron Johnson was like, dude, I'm here because of you, Mark Levin. That's why I ran, because of your influence. But I can't do the thing you're saying. There's no lever. The same thing is true of now the left. People like my old friend Jimmy Dore, comedian, attacking Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the most effective, most progressive politician since Bernie Sanders, arguably way more effective than he has ever been, by the way, with similar policies. Yep. And why? Why are they attacking her? For what reason? Because it gets them ratings. It gets them followers. It gets them ads. Jimmy just bought a $1 million home. Good for you, Jimmy. But that's not how governing works. It's not how you can't message your way into a policy.
So first of all, I love the way you framed that. This is what he's doing. Bought the home. I actually think that we talked about this.
Was that unfair?
No, I don't think it's unfair at all.
I don't know. I actually, good for him, but I'm saying
I think what you just did is you actually put your finger on what is going on in politics right now. We have a government that is not really capable of doing very much. It just isn't. The way it's constructed, the way that it is put together, it is not really able to do very much. But I'll tell you who can say what things should happen. That's people on the outside who have no skin in the game, and there are no consequences for them saying anything. Which, by the way, it's important to point out, that's how Donald Trump became president. It's because he was a pundit who went on Fox News and just schmoozed and talked about what he thought should happen in the country. The problem is that we are in a moment of powerlessness and frustration. In the Democratic Party, by the way, there is going to be a demolition derby civil war that is going to take place.
I'm watching it start right now. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's already starting. And what is going to happen is that a lot of people are going to offer a lot of solutions that don't have any way of actually happening. And they're not actually in any way, shape, or form related to building infrastructure of wielding power or influencing politics. And you're exactly right. There's a financial incentive to see who will push that and become it. And like you said, Jimmy has actually positioned himself now at this point to be some sort of progressive, loud, reactionary pundit. It's the most bizarre thing.
By the way that he is attacking her is layered with sexism.
It's so uncomfortable.
He's spewing it. Would you see that a lot on the left, especially from men? With sexism, less so, I think, with racism on the left, but definitely with the sexism with the men. They don't you have to be careful about how you talk, I think, in this case, about women, powerful women. And it's just disgusting. I'm so disappointed in him.
It's been a weird thing to watch. I found, and this is so dumb. We started talking about Twitter, but we'll go ahead and go down that road. Like, I watched the most recent video of him doing it, and I was like, I have to unfollow this guy. I don't want anything. I gotta move away from this guy. I don't want anything to do with that. It was so uncomfortable and so gross. And meanwhile, she's one of the most progressive members of Congress probably ever. And actually is incredibly talented. She gets modern politics better than most anybody. And the idea that you would go after her because she didn't hold Congress hostage or overthrow Nancy Pelosi, which, good luck. Where's the votes? Where would the votes be on that? They're not there.
But politics is also a strategy.
Yes.
And it's negotiation. And you mentioned West Wing earlier, and I actually don't think it's a bad example, because in the West Wing and in similar films and other shows, they show the horse trading. They show the negotiations. They show the interests that each congressperson has to deal with, competing interests in their own district. They show where the influence comes from, and everybody just wants to burn it all down and have it their way. But it's never been that way in any government that is in any way fair or in any democracy. It's messy, it's ugly, and you need to negotiate and compromise, sometimes with horrible people.
But one of the things, and I think this is really interesting, we're not talking about West Wing. West Wing has two junctures that do not reflect modern reality. When George W. Bush showed up in West Wing, he got his ass beat. He got destroyed. Right? Bartlett was like, that's where I decided to kick your ass and beat you in the election.
Wait, what are you talking about?
It was the guy that he faced for re-election.
Oh, Jimmy Smith's character?
Yeah, no, not Jimmy Smith's. It was somebody else. I can't remember
and that was supposed to be representative of George W. Bush?
Of George W. Bush.
Sorry,
he showed up on, and his whole aw shucks cowboy thing didn't work, right? Because it was a created, manufactured universe. Mitch McConnell does not exist within the West Wing universe because he is a new breed of cynical, nihilistic politician. He's not actually doing very much for Kentucky. He's not actually doing anything for his constituents. He simply is a man who is standing atop history and yelling, stop. That's all he's doing. He is this poison pill that exists to make sure that the government doesn't do anything while you give people a judiciary. That's the one thing that they've done, is that they've given a judiciary. But that's it. It's a single
That's all they want. That's the best.
That's all they want.
But I completely agree with you. And that's what I was going to interrupt. I'm glad I didn't. But on legislation and policy, has he done anything for his people? I agree with you. No. As a matter of fact, he's probably done things counter to their actual interest in Kentucky. But
he's
the judges
lessened the length of their lives by holding back health care and projects.
Them.
He's literally killing them.
But the judges.
Oh. Gotta love our judges, our beautiful judges.
And gotta love them. But that's what people see. That's what his constituency, and that's what keeps him in power. The judges.
Here's my argument, though, and this is important to bring what you're talking about full circle. I think politics has become such an impotent, frustrating game that we've stopped actually talking about the usage of power, and we're talking about symbols of power. The arguments that you're talking about on like Twitter, it's about people saying, you know what? I believe in something that the government's not do, which again, it's like somebody like Jimmy standing on the outside, throwing rocks at the house and saying, you should be doing this. Yep. It's about saying and going back to Twitter, the idea of all these press releases, that's not what I believe in. I would do more. Right. This is what I personally hold true. And it's exhibiting this sort of projection. And that's what politics has become. It's become symbolic cultural war as opposed to an actual usage and waging of power.
Let me make this a little bit more my own political therapy, if you wouldn't mind playing the doctor a little bit more.
Let's do it.
Okay, so I am a man of the left. I am as far to the left as anybody that I know. I don't subscribe to labels on anything, but if you want to talk about an issue, I would land on the far left end of the spectrum. Extreme left. But I also want to get to solutions, and I understand a little bit, or really a lot, about how we get there, from activism to policy. You've always talked about the grassroots. I totally get that and appreciate it. And when we elect people who are reflect our progressive values, in this case, that's great. That's a win. And we're doing that. We are doing that in many ways, and we're holding more moderate Democrats' feet to the fire and so on. But I understand how that governing works, how those compromises work. You have to organize and get people elected. You can't just stand on the sidelines and scream and be mad. And you are still far to the left, but people today were calling me like a centrist and moderate. I'm like, no, I just want to get it done. I want all the things that you want, but I think there's a different way of succeeding in getting there. And they haven't thought about it. I'm sure they haven't.
Between you and me, I've always considered you a staunch neoliberal. That's usually where I put you on the political spectrum. No, I would say this. I would say Donald Trump.
Name an issue.
Donald Trump has really messed up all of our politics, but of course he is a symptom and not the disease.
Right.
If you elect Donald Trump president in 2016, America is great again. You don't have to build a wall. You don't have to pass anything. You don't have to do anything. You just do it. And he tells you that it's great. And it's actually a cynical type of politics. It's by a group of people who have actually given up on anybody doing anything for them, right? Yeah, I understand the Republican Party is going to continue to screw me with my pants on. I'm not going to get health care. I'm going to live a shorter life, and my job's not coming back. But you know what? At least I get to say that I won and America's great, and I get to drive around with the Trump flag and yell at people and flip them off. It is a symbolic, angry gesture, and the left is not immune from it. This is one of the problems, is because the left doesn't engage in the same bad faith prejudices, I think, of the right. We think that somehow or another the left is immune from these type of symbolic, angry gestures. But it's the same thing, because I actually think that capitalism and the unequal nature of our economic system and our political system, it has created a sense of impotence and powerlessness that the only thing you can do is rage against. And because we don't trust each other, we don't work with each other, we don't engage in solidarity, everybody, whether it's on Twitter or on TV or whatever, we're all enemies. I think that's what it boils down to.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. But I want to. What do you want to change? What are your values? Okay, agreed on that. How do we accomplish universal health care? How do we get something similar to a new Green Deal? How do we get it? How do we do it? What's next? Okay, we organize, we elect these people who believe it. Okay, do we have enough of them? Do they have the majority? If they don't, we cannot force the other side to doing it now less than ever, because we have nothing to give them, and they literally do not care about human life. What are you going to shame them? They have none.
They have no shame.
So the point is, all of us on the left are fighting. I mean, I'm just, I'm being an arrogant, sanctimonious prick by saying there's a lot of young or inexperienced, angry people who have no idea how to create change. Furthermore, I would argue, maybe even you're being too cynical here. Like, I lose my job at Sirius. Thank God for this moderate, for-profit, market-driven Heritage Foundation healthcare solution, because now I have subsidized healthcare in New York State. Thank God for Obamacare for my family.
I completely agree with that.
There is a positive thing right there. Gay marriage. So many other things, renewable energy, cafe standards, the Iran deal, the climate. These are real accomplishments. They're not nearly as good as I would have wanted them. But, oh my God, without this healthcare, my family'd be fucked.
But you just opened up the seventh seal of American politics.
Where is it?
And here's the thing. I'm with you, Pete. I'm a leftist. I'm incredibly far left. But I have bad news for people. Barack Obama was not perfect. Barack Obama was not a literal saint from heaven who came down and served us as president of the United States. I have massive problems with who he was as a president, particularly in terms of foreign policy, how the blob of national security got carried out. I wish everything that you just said got pushed further, but that doesn't mean that he didn't have achievements. That doesn't mean that we can't celebrate the good things that he's done. We operate on a hero and a villain mindset. Everyone has to be completely pure or totally evil. Right. And that, by the way, is a religious idea.
Yes.
That is not a political idea. And I'm going to put this out there because I've been getting flack for this, but this is the truth as I know it. I'm going to be honest here. And I didn't expect to talk about this. I didn't expect to get on here and have this conversation. Shit, what are we doing? You want to ask how to move things forward? You want to ask how to get something like the Green New Deal? Here is the problem in a nutshell that we're talking about. I'll tell you how you do it. There are people in middle America, my family, people I know, people I care, people I love, who, by the way, were the people who back in the 1980s had plates of FDR and JFK up in their rooms, right? They were Democrats. Reagan came around, they supported Reagan. Clinton came around, they supported Clinton until NAFTA, and then they supported Obama, and then they voted for Donald Trump. I know that's a weird path to take, but it's a path that they've taken. If you want to take care of global climate change, you're going to have to put some factories in those states that make windmills and solar panels.
Done.
Just put them in there. But here's the problem. This is the issue at the heart of it. And this is where modern politics has a problem. Modern politics has turned into, how do we make things better? It has turned into, okay, things aren't going to get better. Who should it be worse for? Like, it's just a regular amount of suck for everybody, but which group is now going to have it worse, which is what Donald Trump represented. So when I tell people, I'm like, if you actually want to take on climate change, if you actually want to de-radicalize portions of this population and make sure that they're not joining fascist movements, give them a job. Make them do something.
Jennifer Granholm is a new Secretary of Energy. I like her. She was the governor of Michigan. I met her at a pro-choice rally, and then talked to her several times since. I think she's a really powerful, smart woman. She gave a speech, or she gave a commentary on TV the other day where she said what a lot of smart people have been saying, I've been saying, copying it. It's a no-brainer. And this is the most capitalist argument, by the way, if you want to make it that. We should be selling all of the solutions to climate change to the rest of the world rather than buying them from the rest of the world. It's exactly what you just said. We should be building the cars, the batteries, the solar, the wind, all of it, developing every part of it that we possibly can and selling it to the rest of the world. Who disagrees?
Capitalist.
Not all capitalists. Not the capitalists who are making a profit off of renewable energy. The capitalists who are making profits off of fossil fuels. But they're dying.
Okay. Who, by the way, have known about global climate change before the scientists knew about global climate change. Sure, because
there's money in the ground and they want to pull it out. That makes sense for them. It's worked for them, but there's changing.
A second group. There's a second group, too, and this is one of the major problems. One of the reasons that we ended up with the global economy we did is because American workers expect too much. Their minimum wage is too much. They expect there to be regulations. They expect there to be retirement and insurance and all that stuff. It has been about offloading those costs so people can produce things and not have to pay minimum wage and regulations. And that destroyed industry in this country. One of the problems is, as that competition has moved over here, the people that are now standing in the way of exactly what you're saying, which makes all the sense, they don't give a shit about countries. They don't care about nations. If you said America is falling apart, they would say, I'm sorry, what?
Because I have said this 1,000 times. It's the only smart thing I ever felt like I came up with, and it's probably a billion people have said it before me. But what you just said is so important to this conversation, and it is this, succinctly. Capitalism is not patriotic.
No.
You will sell whatever you can for the greatest profit, period, to anybody. If it's to the detriment of the United States, who cares?
If
Doesn't
you're working
matter.
with the Nazis, who cares?
Who cares?
Who cares? And that is the problem. And
the board decides based on the next quarter's profits. Shareholders win. It doesn't matter where the children are dying, where the weapons are aimed, where the air and water's pollution, as long as your quarterly profits increase.
I've started to come around to this understanding. I hope this makes sense. I try and wrestle around with this. I mean, the major project I'm working on right now is leading up to this, but it's the truth as I see it, which is Reaganism and hypercapitalism, particularly, like move the interest of people, right, away from human projects. And it just sort of threw Miracle Grow on corporations until they grew larger than the country. I mean, the major corporations of the world do not have like a homeland anymore. They kind of straddle multiple nations, right? And so, like, for instance, that's one of the problems with America right now is that the corporations that we have birthed, they don't pay taxes. They figured out how not to pay taxes. And if you even start talking about paying taxes, they're like, whoa, is this socialism? Right? Then what actually has happened, I think, and where we find ourselves now, and I think this is a moment, and going back to the research I've been doing on this project, society changes, reality changes. We've gotten to the point where we're still talking about nations. You and I are talking about the United States of America and what's going on in Congress and what's happening in the U.S. presidential election. At some point, those businesses, and by the way, the people who run them and profit off of them, they're not thinking about countries anymore. They want to get past elections. They want to get past Congress. They want to get past all of that. I mean, my God, Elon Musk is talking about colonizing Mars. And he wants to do it to create a libertarian paradise on another planet.
Is that right? I mean, like, what, really? I've never heard anything about his political philosophy.
Have you ever heard Peter Thiel? Have you ever heard Peter Thiel talk about? Have you ever heard him talk about his island idea?
No.
Oh, that's some fun stuff. Peter Thiel wanted to create like a libertarian island off the coast of like America or some other major country that it would basically be a lawless new country. They would create it. I mean, what they're trying to do is they're trying to get beyond the purview of humanity and government. They're up here. We were a larval stage for them, you know, and we birthed them, and now they're above us. And I think Donald Trump's he's that kind of guy. I think once you reach a point of power and wealth, you stop thinking about countries anymore. It's not treason. It's not unpatriotic. You're making a buck, Pete.
Yeah, no, I think that's very true. Once you reach a point of power and wealth as an executive in a company, you are not at all looking out for the best interests of your country, your state, or your community. You just aren't. You're only looking out for the best interests of your company. And I even understand how anyone can begin to argue otherwise. Yeah, that's capitalism. It's not it without putting any judgment on it. That's just what it is.
It's capitalism. And what ends up happening, and the more that I look at history, the more that I'm starting to understand this, nationalism, patriotism, these are weapons. There's something that like a capitalist few are able to say, okay, this will make sure that these people get angry, or it divides people, right? You're a real American. They're not a real American. Ugh. Go out and fight it off. I mean, there's a reason why the Kochs created the Tea Party. You know, like that was, and if you actually look at it, this is like insidious stuff. The Koch brothers created the Tea Party to use racism and prejudice and conspiracy theories to lower taxes and regulations. And look where it's led us. Donald Trump and Trumpism is an offshoot of that. They've created a fascistic movement in order to keep people from being angry at them. Wait, you're upset about the way your life feels? I bet George Soros did that. And it's like, wait a second, what? Wait, George Soros? Oh, that's right, because, he's a Jewish puppet master, right? Or those liberal traders did it to you. Don't ask about us. Don't look behind the curtain. It is a weapon. It's a way to redirect anger and suspicion.
How do you, what economic system or because people, I feel like, get constantly caught up in the labels. And what I was arguing with someone on Twitter about earlier, like, are you a communist? Because you couldn't be further left than me. I was like, I don't know what I am. I think that all of the old economic models are lame because of one and only one thing: climate change. I don't think communism or Marxism solves that. I don't think it will work. I don't. I don't think there's necessarily a positive capitalism is the reason for it. That's definitely not working. I don't want a name for it. I want a solution. I want an economic solution that has incentives that will change people's behavior, because this idea, especially that the left, that thinks that you're going to do something for the right moral reason, is a preposterous notion. We have to convince people who only care about themselves to want to invest in and buy the right things. You have to have a convincing argument for them. They're not going to change because you fucking shame them, because you call them racist. They, like you said earlier, give them a job, give them an education, give them an affordable, healthy life and a solar power plant. You think they're going to be more upset about building solar panels and going down in a fucking coal mine? Come on, son.
No, and by the way, make it like a big masculine thing. Have like a son with giant muscles. Come on, let's make it happen.
Climbing wind turbines is terrifying.
That's awesome. That'd be awesome. Have everybody doing it.
I would do that shit.
So two things. First and foremost, capitalism is not the way it's going to work, because let me deliver a little bit of bad news. And I promise that there's hope in all of this. And I actually just thought of an idea just while you were talking, because you're the best in the business. So I'm going to work it out with you. Okay. But first off, capitalism is not going to fix it. And here's the reason why. Capitalism absolutely relies on constant growth. It always has to grow. It always has to grow. It doesn't matter if you're McDonald's. You have to sell more next year, period. Well, what ends up happening is, and this is why we go out and, we conquer territories or we start an empire, because it's not enough to control one part of land. You got to control more. You have to exploit more people. Yep. Well, here's a problem. And I got bad news for everybody. We're going to lose resources. Our land mass is going to shrink. And if you think America right now is under pressure, wait until the waters start rising and we start getting bunched in, and wait until these red and blue states start having to rely on each other with climate refugees. And if you think what they did to people down at the border was bad this time, wait until there are millions of climate refugees.
But the water rising, the only thing I would change about that argument is lose the water rising argument and use what's happening to the Central American soil.
Yes.
The soil won't be arable. It isn't. Yes. All right. And and the example you just gave is literally happened. That caravan, obviously there's a lot of horrible crime in Central America, and we could talk about America's responsibility in that, what we could do better. But a lot of them are leaving because they're refugees from land that climate change has destroyed, and they can't grow their crops. And so they came to America, and everything you just said happened because their soil isn't good.
Right. And I want to point out as a quick
addendum,
and the
fucking beetles that shouldn't be in this part of the North America are destroying the crop. Like it's
left and right.
Yeah. They're viruses.
To let everybody understand, because we in this country do not understand fascism. Here's when fascists come up. Fascists come up when the left starts making noises about inequality and poor life, and capitalists need somebody to go in and crack their skulls and make them shut up. Fascists are always used by capitalists in times of crisis to push down dissent. So just keep that in mind in our current state. But here's my solution. I'm thinking about this right now. So I'm doing this research right now on the history of Western civilization, and I got to the Crusades. Let me tell you what, that shit blew my mind.
Go ahead.
So, I always kind of thought about the Crusades like, I don't know, like maybe somebody thought that God was actually calling for the Crusades and like it was an actually religious thing. No, there was like crazy internal problems in Europe where like people were fighting over land and resources, and they were killing each other every day. And the church was like, you know what? If those people want to kill each other, give them someone to kill. And it's like, oh, congratulations. You're all now soldiers of Christ. Go over here and fight these people and take their things. And that's what happened. I think that you can actually solve what's going on right now by calling for some sort of massive organization or solidarity that, by the way, would go to what we're talking about, which is climate change. You want to go out and you want to slay some dragons? You want to joust with some windmills? Go and fight climate change. And I think that's where you can actually get past some of these, the divisions and the polarizations. And by the way, that's what saved America from fascism in the 30s and the 40s, is we found the enemy to go out and fight. That's what actually saved us from our spiral.
I think it's great, but the flaw in it is, I suppose, it's not a person. It's not as morally evil as an ideology. The climate changing. It's more nebulous, and I feel like you
don't think you could Armageddon that up or deep impact that up?
I think that you could, for if you use the earlier point you made, which is sex up and dramatize and sell the job. The job is to go here to fight hurricanes, wildfires.
I'll tell you the truth, because I am dedicating myself. One of the things for the new year I've decided is I'm going to keep diagnosing what in the hell is going on, but I'm going to start moving towards solutions. And I want to start having actual conversations about solutions. Right. And I want to be honest about this. And I don't mean this tongue in cheek at all. I'm being 100% clear. I have not said this out loud yet, but I mean it. We need better propaganda. Sure. We need better appeals, because it goes back to what you were saying in the beginning. People think, for whatever reason, that being on the right side of an issue and saying just the same soaring rhetoric, which, by the way, that soaring rhetoric got us here. Do you know what I mean? Like flags, eagles, Mount Rushmore, all that stuff. We have to figure out something new that isn't cliche and something that actually inspires.
Let me try something like this. Take those Marine or Army commercials, which are fucking awesome. Every time I used to see one of those growing up too, like Army of One or a Few Good Men or whatever they, say, and they get their fucking saber, and I'd be like, oh my God.
They're fighting lava monsters.
Oh yeah, they're fighting dragons and shit. I'm like, I want in. And the joke I always make to my friends in the military is those commercials get you in and you never get a sword and you're peeling potatoes in the rusty hull of the USS Forester. But it's not exactly the sexiest job. But that, of course, is a kind of propaganda to get you to join the military branch, and it's patriotic. Why couldn't an energy company have a similar type of ad campaign about the jobs that you're going to get that are well-paying jobs that bring you purpose and I mean, those types of, and then government and then policy that also says everybody's winning here. Who's losing when we build a fucking bike lane? Like the special interests are really changing on this issue, and that's super important, and it's becoming more affordable, and more people are understanding it, but it still does seem, I think, far off for people and not as realistic for people. And I worry about our reaction to COVID. If we're not going to do the right thing here, how can we get people to do the right thing on climate? But it's certainly not the same.
But here, there's a couple things happening with that. First and foremost, I think it would be really important for all of us to go back to the 1930s and look at the New Deal type stuff, which is, I mean, the New Deal gave a bunch of people jobs who could have become fascist. Right? Because we had a growing fascism problem in this country. You had a bunch of young men who might have become fascists, but you put them out on the road. You travel them around the country. They build bridges and parks and infrastructure. I think you could look at that, the propaganda of it, the way that built up masculinity, right? You're going out with your arms and doing something strong, whatever you want to say. I think that would be important. The next part about it is in part what we've been talking about, but it's a little bit different, which is the left is so afraid to dream big. They're so afraid of dreaming big because I actually think a lot of this has happened. There's a good book out there. It's called the Melancholy of the Left, I think it's called, or The Left's Melancholia. And it's all about the idea that post-Soviet Union, because the Soviet Union was a leftist project, because it turned into the abomination that it was and the tragedy that it was, that the left is incapable of coming up with something. You know what I mean? Like it's just so terrifying, the idea that it could get out of control, and they can always point to communism, and they can always point to the specter of communism. And I actually think that the left has more or less have resigned itself to, again, being on the right side of history, but we lose. Right. We lose when it comes down to it. And by the way, as a person who supports the Chicago Cubs, I understand it. I get it.
I'm a Jets fan.
Losing builds character. right? Who wants to be the Yankees? So, but I actually think that the left needs to reimagine what the future can be, which is the main problem of humanity. There's only one solution right now about what the future is going to look like, and it's to reverse time and go back to fascism. That's what this whole thing is about. We have to move forward and figure out something new.
The problem I find, I'm lately really getting annoyed with people saying the left needs better messaging. And I mentioned that tweet earlier. And I agree that they do. Okay. But the idea that the antithesis is that the right's messaging is so great. By the way, I'll just say this, probably for the first 15 years of me hosting a talk show, I made that argument. But I find a lot of flaws in the argument that I've made for so long. And this is the main one. The right is really a one group of very homogenous people who are almost entirely white and also very religious. If you're in that club, it's not hard to persuade them of anything. You have very common interests, beliefs, and value sets. And I'm not even judging that. It's just mostly white people who are mostly religious, who mostly live in rural areas, or certainly not in cities or suburbs. That's who it is. It's easy to message to them. It's not hard. They all speak the same language.
Can I share a text message I got recently?
But the left is fighting amongst each other, black and white, old and young, capitalist and non. There isn't a message. It's not homogenous. So messaging to the left will not be received the same for me as it would be for some maybe young black woman or something. I don't know. So I live in Georgia, and I have to tell you that I cannot escape the special election. It's impossible. Oh, yeah. It's impossible, sure. Pete. Well, do you watch like traditional terrestrial TV and see where do you get bombarded? The phone? It doesn't matter. It's everything from YouTube to TV to streaming services. It's everywhere. Got it. Yeah. I don't know who it was. It was some jerk who signed me up for, some Republican. Yeah, I get that too. Whatever. Stop giving people ideas. Yeah. I'm going to read you a tweet or a text that I got sent. All right. Jared, Democrats are going to take our guns. That's it. That's not nuanced. Yeah. That's not good messaging. It's base level scaremongering, reptilian brain thing. And if you watch one of these Loeffler ads that goes after Raphael Warnock, it's not hard to determine what it's saying. Black. He's a black man. He's a dangerous black man. You live in Georgia. Have you forgotten that this is a black man? And that's all. You live in Georgia. Have you forgotten this is a black man? Yeah. It's not good messaging. And I actually will throw this out because one of my pet peeves, and maybe we can go rounds on this thing or whatever. I was really frustrated by how everybody raised up the Project Lincoln thing, right? And everyone's just like, these are great ads. These are just perfect ads. They're not. They were actually really terrible ads, but they felt good for people watching them. It was like, oh my God, like it's talking to me. It's speaking to me. Well, guess what? The left is really different from the right. We don't work on that sort of stuff like we do, again, on Twitter, and it feels good to share their ads, but there's nothing of actual substance in them. There's nothing that actually promotes anything. And we've seen the numbers. They didn't help. They didn't actually do anything. They didn't actually pull away any Republicans because Republicans just want to be told what they believe and have it continue to go and go and go. Messaging is not always the thing. It's more in terms of what you give people and where you're taking people. Which is why people who understand the history of government understand, and this is one of the most convincing arguments I've ever heard. My friend Dr. Aaron Carroll would make this all the time when we talk about universal health care. Republicans know this. Democrats obviously know it, but Republicans have been bitten by this many times. If you give somebody something, a benefit, an opportunity, a freedom, you cannot very easily ever take it away. Yep. So Republicans are terrified about more benefits in healthcare, even though they themselves passed during the Bush administration Part, I think, B, Medicare Part B. But they did that to win over seniors. Great. Yes. They got them. But that's the point. You can't create a Medicaid expansion and then put that back in the bag. So I completely agree with you. And I think that Democrats have been trying to do that. But it's really hard to get those policies passed. And they're so demagogued and demonized by the right that and it's very effective, that it scares everybody.
Yeah, if you go back into the 1990s when Bill Clinton was trying to, do something with healthcare, the main opponent was Will Kristol, who, by the way, now is, I guess, in the resistance. It's weird that he's, talking against Trump and against the Republicans, right?
Fuck him and everybody that was involved with the Iraq
War. That dude
has
has more blood on his hands than
exactly. I got up and I've told you this before. I think he sat down at a restaurant and I got my wife up and we left. That guy can't eat across from that man.
He's a disgusting person. Yeah. And he actually, if you go back and you look at the memos back in the day when they were trying healthcare reform, and by the way, it was moderate healthcare reform. Clinton was bringing in the healthcare corporations. He was bringing in all of the businesses. It was not some sort of big, massive takeover or a socialist plan or whatever.
Though, but you had to bring in the healthcare.
I'm not saying that you don't, but what I'm saying is that Kristol then sent out one memo after another to Republicans that said, if he gets this done, they're always going to be the party that gave everyone healthcare, and you're not going to get rid of it. You're not going to get rid of it. And so we have to call it a socialist takeover. That's it. That's the only thing that we can do.
And they've been playing that song since Ronald Reagan made a record, a vinyl record demonizing Medicare.
Yeah, no, it's the danger of socialist medicine. Yeah. I mean, and that's the whole thing. It's the entire game that they have. And what is actually taking place, and this is terrible, is, and I think this is what that whole rhetoric of you can keep your doctor or they'll take away your doctor or whatever. This goes back to the imagination thing, which is the American people don't trust the government to actually do things for them, particularly post Reagan. So if they tried anything, they would make it worse. Just leave me with my shitty health care. Just don't even worry about trying to do something. We need a reinvigoration, and forgive the phrase, but a reinvigoration of hope. We need a reinvigoration of the idea that the government is out to help people. And by the way, I keep sending out feelers to people in the Biden transition. I'm like, give people money to make their stop signs better. You know what I mean? Just do something that people can see. Start building back trust. Put some money somewhere where you wouldn't expect it. Yep. Indiana, Ohio, somewhere that didn't vote for you. And then the problem is the left is why would you give those people money? Why would you give those people jobs? Those people are the people who voted for Trump. Don't you think you should be helping the people? And then it just turns into nothing. It's a big, giant mess, but we have to do something. We have to change this.
Let me ask you, before I let you go, about where we're at with how many days, let's say it's the 21st. So a month until inauguration, and the reporting as to what's been occurring in the White House over the last several days has really been terrifying, but also to some extent the walls have held up, and that Trump has brought in conspiracy theorists like Michael Flynn and Sidney Powell, but his sycophants like his chief of staff, who is the furthest to the right, crazy, awful person, Mark Meadows, and his lawyer, who is apparently also a real Trumper, loves him, Pat Cipollone, is saying to Sidney Powell and Michael Flynn, who should be in jail, listen, we can't do that. We can't do the things that you are saying that we should do. We can't
a military coup.
We can't launch a military coup. We can't seize the voting machines. Ken Cuccinelli pushing back. The Trumpers are pushing back on Trump. I just saw a headline while we were talking about somebody else saying, Pat Robertson. Yep. We've got to move on. Pat Robertson. Yep. So, what is your analysis of what Trump is still able to do if no one will carry out his order? I've always thought that it could get to a point where Trump says, and it was that point, he tried to fire Mueller and they wouldn't do it. Sometimes he orders people to do things and they're like, I can't. And I think that's where we're at. He's going to just keep going crazy and telling people to do stuff. And people are, now that he hasn't been reelected, they're like, why would I do that? In 10 days, they're going to fucking prosecute me if I do that. No, thanks.
I tell you, you got to love every time that Pat the Gays Cause Hurricanes Robertson is the voice of reason. That is just a hell of a good time. No, I think what's ended up happening here, and it's really hard to wrap your head around, because it goes back to what we've been talking about, which is the financial incentive of things. It's a really sad truth. But Donald Trump, and who knows, his wet nerf brain, who knows what he thinks has happened, right? Part of him knows he lost the election. Yeah. The other part is just probably still golfing, as he goes to sleep.
Today, apparently, there's reporting he was speculating about how one gets an airport named after them.
Stop it.
Yep. That's the reporting. Yeah.
Which, by the way, is the pinnacle of Donald Trump's life.
Yeah,
if he can get some shitty, airport, that has one international flight.
Now there's a gliders only up in upstate New York. I think they should go with that one. No engines.
But the whole point is Trump has to pretend like the election was stolen so that post-presidency, he can make the most money possible. He has to be the president who had the election stolen. Yeah. And so as a result, he has to do whatever he can in order to pretend that he lost the election. Michael Flynn does not actually want a military coup, but he's also the head QAnon guy who has to talk about a military coup. He has to be the person that says it, like the pundits that we talked about, that there's no consequence. I was talking about this on the podcast that comes out tomorrow. Can you imagine, like, you advocate that in order to make some money on your Patreon? There should be a military coup. And the next thing you know, you're in the Oval Office and the president of the United fucking States says it. Like, that's a whole different territory. Sidney Powell wants to basically have her own show on Newsmax if she can make it happen. And all of these people are flirting with the idea of a coup. And thank God the Republican Party knows that Trump is a loser and that they've juiced him for everything that they can get from him. They're going to have to continue to, make inroads with his supporters, although they hate them. They're going to have to try and turn the party into, Trump, QAnon, Republican Party, presented by Sbarro's, whatever it ends up becoming.
They're not going to get many legit sponsors.
Sbarro's.
My Pillow.
I don't. Yeah, that's right. Yes, the QAnon Trump Republican Party presented by My Pillow. Yep. That is absolutely true. But they're all playing a dangerous game, because we've actually reached a point where the idea of a coup has not only been mentioned but has been considered. It's hard to put that genie back in. You know what I mean? Like, that's a hard thing to get past. But it's all a grift and it's all a coup at the exact same time. It is just the most mind-bendingly infuriating thing. And by the way, Pete, you know this as well as I do. You spend enough time on the social medias. The president of the United States floated the idea of a military coup. And it's like the third or fourth thing that people are talking about after it turns out Martin Shkreli had a girlfriend for a hot minute.
I still haven't read that story. I refuse to read that story. I don't know what that's about. I don't want to know what it's about. Don't tell me. I can't.
The article about Trump floating a military coup, they don't mention that he floated a coup until the 6th paragraph of the story.
Your specific story, a specific media outlet?
Specific New York Times report on that meeting. It's the 6th paragraph before they mention the fact that Trump floated the idea of a military coup.
So you just on, I guess, the last episode of your podcast, you talked about the hack. And so to me, the Muckrake Political Podcast, everybody, if you haven't checked it out, it's in the show notes, and support Jared on Patreon, get his book, everything. And so to me, that's the biggest danger right now. And I wanted to know, how impactful you thought that was. But more importantly, before you maybe answer that, like, you've been ringing the alarm bells along with a lot of other people who study authoritarianism for a long time. But I feel like right now, like I said earlier, he really can't do much because he needs people to carry out those orders for him. So my question is, what is your concern generally about the next month, next 3 to 4 weeks, about what he might do outside of fucking executing people? And how worried are you about this hack?
Well, I'm very worried about the hack. I'll talk about that in a second. But I think what's going to happen is he's going to go to Mar-a-Lago for Christmas and just not come back.
I think that's true, too. Yeah.
I think he's just going to go home for Christmas and just not come back.
They don't want him there, though, permanently. Apparently, those people in New Yorkers don't want him. Where's he going to live?
I mean, he'll find a place. I mean, he'll open a Trump Tampa Bay or something. That's what'll end up happening. Yeah. But I think that's what's going to happen with him. What I'm more worried about is not necessarily what he's going to do. It's the fact that for the next 30 days, America, my God, Pete, we have hundreds of thousands of people dead. Hundreds of thousands of people dead. And we're on the ropes. There's no real progress. People aren't stopping. It's getting worse every day. We're incredibly vulnerable right now. I mean, we've already seen Israel start to make some inroads over with Iran and mess around with some stuff. I mean, Russia's been pulling all this stuff out. The really frightening thing about the hack and the conversations I've been having with people is the prevailing opinion thinks that the really frightening thing in all of this, it's not just economic, but it's the possibility of power grids. And, if you look at, people have been talking about this left and right. The idea of a nuclear war might not be the war of the future. It might be an EMP that wipes out electronics. Right. This would be an EMP without the EMP. right? The idea that it would just wipe out power and infrastructure and kind of fry the system for a while. That's a frightening thing. That's like a doomsday type scenario.
I feel like that. I'm not at all worried about that because we would do so much more worse. Like, this is the thing that people aren't saying. Who was on yesterday that said this a couple of times? Let's be clear. We are doing this exact same thing to them.
I don't disagree.
All day long. So it's no different than any other mutually assured destruction. You want to shut off our power? We'll shut yours off, and it'll be hell of a lot worse.
I don't disagree. And by the way, I think that any conversation about all this stuff is completely disingenuous if we don't have that conversation. Yeah. I mean, I was like one of those people in 2016 when we talked about the Russian interference in the election. It's like, I hate to be the person that says this, but we sort of pioneered that. We sort of created electioneering. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like going into other countries.
We've interfered all over the fucking place. I mean,
left and right. We've done it forever. Yeah. But the problem is exactly what you're saying is we have now entered. And by the way, it's not even the same thing as mutually assured destruction, because at least then we were hiding underneath our desks. We had an understanding that there was a threat. Right. And now, if you actually talk to the people who know about nuclear war, they know about like these threats, they'll tell you like we're as close to midnight as we've ever been outside of maybe like the Cuban Missile Crisis.
And always very close to an accident.
And we're always very close, but we're actually sort of inching closer and closer. And you're exactly right. It's just one more damn redundancy. Right. So I do think, and this is true, and we don't have to put on tinfoil hats.
Bring it to me, sweet vaporization.
Russia has gotten their money's worth with Donald Trump.
Oh, yeah.
He hurt America in so many ways. Yep. He hurt Americans. He hurt our standing in the world.
Asymmetric warfare is always kicked our ass in every way, from the insurgencies in Iraq and Afghanistan to the disinformation and interference in our election and making us hate each other even more. It beats us up every time. Asymmetric warfare. The only time that ever worked for us, I think, is in the American Revolution.
Wow, that sounds right.
Am I right? Like, when were we ever the insurgents that were the underdogs that had to use asymmetric warfare? We've been using more conventional means of power and influence and dominating everybody. And so the Viet Cong did this. You know, they took their fucking clothes off and put on another clothes. The same thing with Afghanistan and Iraq. And the Russians couldn't beat us ever in a conventional war. And so they fucked us on they kicked our asses. And the thing is, that's crazy, is we did nothing. We were invaded and interfered, and we've done nothing.
But actually, the Russians, and this goes back to what I was talking about in terms of like that nations are just kind of gone, or the idea that we need to pioneer a vision for the future. Do you know who else has a vision of the future? Russia. Russia has an incredibly powerful vision of the future, which is all about aristocratic, kleptocratic rulers, which is the idea that you pretend, like in a managed democracy, you pretend that there are elections and people have rights, but no one wants to use them. And you create these facades and illusions.
How is that any different than the modern American Republican Party, the oligarchs?
That's exactly right, which is why they are so close to Putinism, because both of them, by the way, are nostalgic-based movements, right? They're all based on white identity, nostalgic-based movements.
The main difference I see is the use of Christianity in America that is not at play in Russia, religion.
Oh, absolutely it is.
Is it?
Oh, yeah. One of the most brilliant things that Putin ever did was he was able to take nostalgia for Soviet Russia and nostalgia for the church and combine the two. So like one of the ways that he was actually able to consolidate power and crack down on people the way that he was in order to start really going after gay people through the idea of moral panics.
Right. Well, he's definitely done that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shit.
It's ugly. Yeah.
Well, what's your happiest childhood Christmas memory?
You know, I was actually thinking about this the other day. I had one of those years when I was really, really little that I wanted to catch Santa Claus.
Oh, my God. That's mine. What's your age?
I want to say I was about 7.
Same, 5, 6, maybe.
I heard a rustling. And I just hauled ass, Pete. I just hauled ass into the living room and I chased my stepdad out of the house. And it was, you know, back before climate change. It was like one of those real Indiana winters, the old school ones, you know, with like a foot of snow outside. And I have to assume, I didn't see him come in. I have to assume he was probably walking around in jockey shorts and nothing on. And he just hauled ass out of the house.
Because you caught him laying out presents?
He was one step ahead of me. I just caught a glimpse, but just enough for him to run out the back door. Like his life depended on it.
Really funny. I actually did. Mine's a little more pathetic because I did the same thing, but not for Santa. So I guess it's not a Christmas memory.
I bet you're going to tell me you were like 25.
I was last year. I waited and waited for Santa. And you know who showed up? My Trump-loving neighbor. And stole Christmas. No, I waited, Jared, for the Easter Bunny. Hid behind the couch and fell asleep and slept on the floor behind the couch while the Easter Bunny laid out everything. Missed it.
I have to tell you, I was lying
on the ground behind the couch.
I'm now picturing you at 5 years old, but with the same bald head and beard.
Big mess.
Just in like a little pajama footy situation. That's the cutest thing I've ever imagined.
I was not always bald. I had a lot of a mop on my head. They used to call me Big Head Little Body because I had so much hair it made my head look bigger. And then when I was 23, it all abandoned ship.
Big Head Little Body. How's that not the name of this podcast?
It's the name of my corporation. All right, that's a good Christmas memory. It's a good one. I like that. I love that. We used to wake up in the middle of the night and go down and look at what we gotten, and the stockings were always overflowing with cool stuff. And I would wake up my brother and try to get him to go down with me, and he would be like, "Leave me alone, Dick." He never joined me. Down there with a flashlight. Jared Yates Sexton. Listen to the podcast. Get the book. Follow him on Twitter. Fucking love talking to you. This was a great one. Thank you.
You're the best, Pete. Thanks.
Jared Yates Sexton, everybody. Get his book. Listen to his podcast. Listen and subscribe to his podcast. Support him on Patreon. Tell him you heard him right here on Twitter. Reach out to him at JY Sexton and say, I heard you on Stand Up with Pete Dominic. Reminder to donate right now to the greatest charity that there is. GiveWell.org. Go to GiveWell.org/standup and make a donation right now. Also, what is your favorite childhood Christmas tradition, or memory rather, if you had one, if you did the Christmas? What was your favorite memory? I'd love to hear from you on that. If you're still listening, email me standupwithpete@gmail.com. Hope to see you tomorrow night at the Hangout, 8 p.m. for subscribers, and join us on Discord anytime on the Discord platform, where you can chat with all kinds of folks from the stand-up community, which we'd love to have you be a part of. All right. Be the change you want to see. You're not alone. I love you. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Take it away, John Carroll. The sirens teach you better stand up. Stand up. Let the brave meet the challenge. Let the meek weak flee. Oh, you better stand up.